The Unwanted, Chapter 6, Saigon, May 1975. After the fall of Saigon, my mother took Jimmy and me back to the rented house near the park. For the next 4 days and nights, we lived in its basement. The floor was dirt, the walls were sandbags. At one end was a small bathroom, which had a dim light. From it ran a cord to the bare bulb that hung over the living area. Because of the frequent lapses in electrical service, candles were our primary source of light. Each day, we huddled on our small futons and listened to the foreign sounds of marching feet and pounding fists reverberating from door to door down the block, until it was our turn to be tabulated into the new system. We hid like a family of rats during the rainy season. Only Luan dared to go outside to search for food, gather news, and do errands for my mother. Before leaving, she would cover her body in black garments in order to blend in with the rest of the people in the city. Until she returned home, we would watch for her petite frame from the brim of an oval window a few inches above ground level. The market did not have much to offer. During wartime, no one in his or her right mind would be foolish enough to exchange food for money, for fear of starvation and or inflation in the future. The markets had always been busy social gathering places, but now they were full of communist soldiers. Hoping to draw as little attention to herself as possible, Luan never dared to stay long. Although the food she brought back was usually stale and meager, she managed to create tasty rice and vegetable dishes, mostly composed of either Chinese spinach or watercress, and flavored by the exotic fish-based sauces she had learned in cooking school. We were grateful for every bite. Luan would prepare the food in the first floor kitchen and bring it down to us in the basement. The news that Luan brought back consisted of rumors and speculation spread by confused and uninformed people. Observations of the Viet Cong's activities yielded a few hints for survival. The first and foremost was that in public or at social meetings, everybody had to appear to be a communist. Any accusation to the contrary would bring instant and horrifying wrath upon the accused. No one trusted anyone, not even family members. Popular fears centered on the new government and its officials. As for the Red soldiers, the majority of them seemed harmless, especially to the children. Nevertheless, everyone was aware that the curfew started every night at exactly 9 o'clock, and whoever was caught on the streets after that time would be shot on sight without warning. Reports of these curfew deaths added more terror to the already frightened city. To make their presence felt throughout Saigon, the Viet Cong divided themselves into small groups and spread out. Many eager families volunteered their homes for the soldiers, praying that a sincere gesture would somehow redeem their past sins. The rest of the troops settled into vacant houses, hotels, halls, and schools, or bunked down in the streets. Inside our new prison, my brother and I became the center of my mother's misery. She had always tried to protect us from the rumors, stares, and judgments that our American features drew. But now the pressures on her were more than she could handle. Hiding in the furthest corner of the cell, my brother and I watched our mother pace like a caged animal. And for the first time in my life, I was overwhelmed with self-hatred, for I realized that I was different, and so was my brother, for whom I held a similar and intense dislike. I wanted to pull the fair hair out of my head, scratch off my pale skin, and peel the expensive sandals from my feet. I prayed for something to happen, anything at all, so that the shame would no longer haunt my mother's eyes. Instead, I just sat there, numb with fear, and prayed for time to pass quickly. One afternoon, after a couple days of hiding, my mother sent Luan to the market to bring back some black dye. Without warning, she swooped over to our hiding corner and seized us with her sharp fingernails, as if she were catching a fowl in its cage. Ignoring our frightened cries, she pulled us along the ground into the bathroom. As we kicked and screamed, she poured the dark liquid over us and marinated our blonde heads for what seemed a long time. I remember sitting next to my brother in the bathroom, trying to cover my bare chest with my thin arms. Her roughness as she tugged at our hair and her silence burned a panic in us. Both of us were crying from the sting of the dye. She loomed over the two of us with a crazed look in her eyes and pointed her forefinger straight at our faces. "Listen, you two, shut up. Men don't cry. Remember that." And she added more dye to our hair. Unable to obey, we could not stop crying. Finally, my grandfather ran into the bathroom and struck her face with the back of his hand. Pointing to our reflections in the mirror, my grandfather shouted at her, "Stop this madness right now. Look at what you've done to your children. Is that really necessary?" My mother looked into the mirror and froze. Looking back at her were two little faces covered in ink and streaked with tears. We could not meet our mother's eyes. With her shaking hands and crimson face covered by a mask of hatred, she looked like a monster to us. Shocked by the image in the mirror, my mother began to sob. She knelt to wipe the stains off our faces with the back of her hands. "I am so sorry," she whispered gently. The deranged woman who had terrified us was gone, and my mother's voice murmured in our ears, "I can't help you. Nothing I can do can change who you are." She added, "Please don't cry. All of it is my fault. I don't know what came over me, but I promise I will not let anything or anyone harm you two, not as long as I am still alive." We all cried on the bathroom floor until there were no more tears left. Later that afternoon, my mother made a decision. After she sent my brother and me upstairs, she announced to my grandparents and Luan that it was time for a family meeting. From the stairs, Jimmy and I strained to hear the conversation. We could not make out much of what the adults said, but we could hear my grandfather's voice shattering the air. I had never heard him so angry before. "No, I forbid you. It is very dangerous. You are crazy." My mother took Luan aside and sent her out into the street and then continued to argue with her parents for another hour. At last, as my mother pushed the door open and stormed back downstairs, I could hear my grandfather's voice chasing after her, filled with indignation. "Leave Luan out of this. She is too young to make such a decision." "Don't you see, Daddy? Neither of us has a choice," my mother shot back. "Then wait till we get back home before you do anything irrational. Please, for heaven's sake, don't make another wrong decision today," he urged. My mother marched into the bathroom and slammed the door behind her. Shortly afterward, Luan returned. With her was an old woman whom she told to wait at the front step. From the window on the first floor, we watched the elderly woman in silence. Standing by the door and clutching a dirty bag between her breasts, she waited for Luan. Her face was seamed by countless deep wrinkles, and her spine bent, forcing her gaze to the ground. Her hair was thin and white. As she noticed us watching her, her face rearranged itself into a smile that was nothing more than a hollow, reddish, toothless depression. To us, she appeared a figure out of a fairy tale, and we half expected her to bolt through the air with a broomstick. Luan reappeared with my mother behind her, and they led the woman down to the basement. Are you the other one who needs my services besides this girl?" the old lady asked. "Are you sure you're only 3 months pregnant? From the look of that belly, I swear you look a lot more—" My mother turned to hush the woman. The look of concern was quite noticeable on their faces. The visitor stepped into the room to put her bag down on the floor and breathe out a sigh of relief. Seeing my grandparents waiting by the foot of the basement door, she nodded to them in acknowledgement. Luan introduced the old woman to us. "Everyone, this is Mrs. Tom, the only midwife left in downtown Saigon. She comes highly recommended to us by the people at the market. I told her that we were not from around here and that we do not know anyone. That is why she agreed to help us." Yes, nice to meet everyone. Forget the proper introductions. We'll have to hurry up. I have 2 more cases downtown, and I have to beat the curfew." Mrs. Tam rushed through her sentences rudely. "Are you 2 ready for this?" She pointed to Jimmy and me. "What's going on with the children's hair?" "Nothing that concerns you," my mother answered irritably. "Let me take the children upstairs first." "No need to. There is nothing here for them to watch anyway. I am just going to give you some herbs to take. Shouldn't take more than 8 hours for them to work, and tomorrow your problem will be all over." "In that case, let's do it," my mother said. The old lady searched her bag for 2 small wooden cases. They had rustic carvings of 2 gold dragons holding a black capsule and were sealed with sap. She laid them on the floor like 2 objects of great value.